Hey there, Elwood City Limits listeners. It's Will here, and I'm presenting you something that was originally first on the Patreon feed, and now it's coming to the free feed, because this one is all about, well, the love of Arthur, really. This is a double, it's called the Review Extravaganza, because it involves reviews of two Arthur products. The first one is a little segment of me talking with Arthur historian, fount of knowledge, Peebs. He's been on the show before on Elwood City Limits, and he got to see this year the Arthur musical. Did you know that there was an Arthur musical? Maybe you didn't. And if not, you're going to want to get the skinny from Peebs. It was the first time that he ever saw a musical, and it had to be the Arthur one, of course. Peebs has a lot to say. Always enjoyed talking with him, and I think you're going to like it too, and you should definitely look up more about the Arthur musical. There's images online. Maybe you'll get to find a little bit more at this point whenever you're hearing this. Then I got the chance to sit down with another Arthur podcast. Yes, it's true. Elwood City Limits is not the only game in town, and this is a great opportunity to introduce you to another great Arthur podcast. They are the Sugarbowl pod, and we talked about a few things. We came together because I wanted to talk to another Arthur podcast about the official Arthur podcast that has been going on for a little while now. Now, at the time you're hearing this, there may be much more episodes out. This was originally recorded and uploaded to Patreon in mid-November, so you're probably going to be hearing this a little bit later, and we had only had about 4 official Arthur podcast episodes, but we took the opportunity to kind of give our thoughts on it, the three of us, Chris and Eli from the Sugarbowl pod, but I also wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you to them, because their podcast is really great, and if you want to have a bit of a different vibe in your go through Arthur, I mean, there's no reason why you can't listen to them too, and they're really great guys. They're very funny. I had a blast talking to them. We reminisced about Arthur. We talked about the official Arthur podcast. We just kind of commiserated on what it's like to run an Arthur podcast in a little bit of a state of the art here in 2022. So I hope that you enjoy this Arthur ECL review extravaganza whenever you're listening to this. Now, of course, if you want to listen to it earlier and listen to all kinds of exclusive audios earlier, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits is the way to do it. This was uploaded in an off week when we weren't able to put together an episode of For the Kids, but we ended up creating something that was also really cool. And sometimes that comes out of necessity, and we just end up coming together and putting together some cool stuff. So really hope you enjoy this, and please have a great time wherever you are, whenever you may be listening to this. One thing that I've been looking to find out more about, I've been noticing it on Instagram lately, is that there is an Arthur musical going on as of this recording this at the end of October. So this fall 2022, there is an Arthur musical. It's called Arthur and Friends Make a Musical. Unfortunately, it is restricted, I guess, to a certain segment of America. And I am not American. Lucas is going through America, but he doesn't actually have time to take in a play, unfortunately. But we do know somebody who not only can go see that musical, but actually did. And that's one of our wonderful patrons, friend of the show, and former co-host, and probably will be a co-host again someday. That would be Peebs. Hey, Peebs.
Hello, Will. Thanks for having me back.
I'm so glad to talk to you today, Peebs, and I'm really happy that you were kind of keeping me in the loop about this at all. So, like I said, I kind of saw pictures and footage on like Instagram and stuff. How did you first find out that there was an Arthur musical?
Yeah, I think I found out the same way you did. I think it was Mark Brown himself who, I believe he went to the opening show and he posted some pictures of some of the performers. I don't think they were actually from that night, though. I think he just kind of took like some photos of a screenshot or something like that, because
Okay.
they are actually, it looks like from the two different casts. So I don't know if those are actually like true photos that he took. But nonetheless, he's the one who got me kind of keyed in on, what was going on here.
And you mentioned that you were going to go see it in your area. Now, of course, you don't need to give away your full address or anything, but can you give us a little information of where was this playing? Where did you go to see it?
This was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I did have to drive about 4 or 5 hours, but it was something I was willing to do. I haven't taken any road trip like since the pandemic started, so this was kind of a nice way to get out for sure. But yeah, definitely anyone in the Midwest in this area, I would highly recommend if you can go see it.
Yeah, and you had a lot of good things to say. I want to make sure to kind of get a little bit more detail in your thoughts here. So the show is called Arthur and Friends Make a Musical. I'm also seeing that this is from the creators, or rather a studio that put on Goosebumps the musical, which is like, oh, geez, Peebs, you're getting access to all of these cool off-Broadway musicals that I only wish that I could see, and hopefully my greatest hope would be that they would be successful enough to come all the way over to Canada, but I'm not exactly going to hold my breath. So for any of our listeners in America who aren't able to make the trip, for any listeners in Canada, other parts of North America, and internationally even, so let's start off with, an Arthur musical. I'll just kind of ask because I'm curious, how long was it, roughly?
It said it was 75 minutes on the website for the event. I didn't really look at my watch or anything to keep track of time, but there was about a 10-15 minute intermission in the middle. I will say the first half kind of breezed by in my view. The second half was a little more dry, but that's all right.
Okay, so what is the it probably says a lot about the show and just the title, Arthur and Friends Make a Musical. But what's kind of if you had to sum up the story, what's the journey we take through it all?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised to kind of figure out along the way that there were a lot of references to TV episodes. So really the whole plot of this musical is that Mr. Ratburn's class is putting on a musical about Elwood City. So in that way, it's sort of like the episode Elwood City Turns 100, the 100th TV episode. But it didn't end up, going that same route. They did end up doing a play about Elwood City. This time it was called Elwood City Rocks.
Okay.
So it was kind of similar in that aspect, but along the way, Arthur's family and friends have to kind of help Arthur through his anxieties about his role in this Elwood City Rocks musical.
Now, one thing that was immediately apparent from seeing pictures, and I mean, this is easy to see if you just search Arthur stage musical. What I really like, and what I really wish I was able to support by being able to see it. You take a look at the cast photos, and it's a very multiracial cast. In fact, there's a lot of black actors in prominent roles, including in the role of Arthur, and I believe Mr. Ratburn as well. I don't really have a question there. I just think that that's really cool, and I wanted to point that out. Was there anybody in the cast from your perspective who you felt was a standout?
Personally, myself, I liked the girl who played DW. I thought she had her sassiness down. She was always rolling her eyes and putting her hands on her hips. She was the perfect DW, I would think. One other thing, kind of along the lines of what you were saying before, one thing I was kind of impressed by, the very first thing they said when they opened the show was they acknowledged the indigenous peoples that lived in that area and still do today. And that was also something they listed first on the playbill that they had for the show as well. So I was pretty impressed by that. That was a nice little acknowledgement.
That's a becoming a more and more common practice these days, a land acknowledgement, and especially here in Canada where we have such a history with our lands being having indigenous people be our first people. I hear that a lot within kind of the work that I do, and so I'm glad to hear that they are doing it here as well. We don't have to discuss spoiler details or anything like that, or any of the songs in the soundtrack like that you're still kind of humming or thinking about.
Honestly, no. Um, I think it was definitely geared toward kids. I think it said 5+ ages, in
Hmm.
their families, of
Hmm.
course, but it was definitely a kids musical. Um, so really, I can't say any of the songs really stuck out or I'm still humming today. So,
Okay.
but
I,
that's not to
I
say they were bad songs at all.
right.
Just, tailored toward kids, I guess.
And that's also what I wanted to ask. I mean, I think that's something we run into as adult fans of Arthur is that sometimes you interact with actual children within the fan base. What was kind of the range of ages that were in the audience? Were you one of the older people that didn't necessarily have adult accompaniment, or what kind of age groups were we seeing?
Well, for me, I'm in my late 20s. I'm pretty sure I was the only, well, I actually don't want to say the only
Hmm.
20-ish person. I did see a couple others who were not there with kids from my point of view. But
Right.
for the most part, it was families, kids probably under the age of 10. Um, like it was not a sold out show by any means. There were plenty of
Right.
seats still available. I don't know if that's just bad advertising. I don't know what the deal was, but um,
Right.
one nice thing that was nice about that, it was a obviously not small. It was a small audience, and at the end they were able to do a quick Q&A um,
Oh.
with some of well, all the actors were back on stage, and they asked kids to raise their hand and ask any questions that they had about the stage, the props, things like that. Pretty much anything involved with the show. And the kids did have some, interesting questions, of course, as kids will ask. But I thought that was another nice little aspect at the end there.
Do you remember any of the questions in particular?
One girl just said, like, how did they make all the stuff? So I'm assuming that meant the props and the
Yeah.
stage design and all that. At the beginning, there was, the iconic Arthur kind of black and white checker circle.
Oh.
Someone did ask about what that was supposed to represent, and one of the performers did kind of go into that detail about how, that kind of design style is seen on the theme song of the TV show and on the covers of the
Hmm.
books, things like that. So,
Cool. All right. And again, I want to leave as much in the theater as possible. So that's I'm glad to have your firsthand report here, Peebs. And it is a little bit too bad that it couldn't be released. I guess on maybe a bigger stage. I feel like you could still capitalize on the popularity of Arthur for maybe a bigger release, or maybe this is more true to its spirit. Arthur, as big as Arthur has gotten and probably will be, there is still a spirit to it that is very much, maybe not low key is not the right word, but
mhm.
it's humble. The show, the books, it all feels very humble, and that also seems very appropriate from what you're telling me. Is there anything else from the experience of seeing it that you feel is noteworthy?
Well, I think I've told you this before, but I don't know if it's made it onto the podcast yet. I really haven't been to like any stage musical in my life before, besides like a high
Oh,
school or like a church event,
I
smaller
see.
productions like that. So this was actually my
Hmm.
first time. So I don't know if that's a good thing or
Ah.
a bad thing that it was a kids Arthur musical, but hey, I made it.
It seems appropriate for you, Peebs. Then I guess I'll just follow up with what was it like to see a for real stage musical? Not to discredit your high school production, but yeah, what was your first musical experience like as someone who has maybe never been before?
Well, I mean, I will say that all of the performers did an excellent job. There were three adult actors, the mom, dad, and Mr. Ratburn, and then the rest of them were, I believe, probably all high school, maybe late, middle school age. But they were
Right.
all very good, from what I could tell. Of course, like I said, I'm not a musical expert or anything like that, but from what I can tell, they were all pretty good. They all had their characters down pat.
Excellent. I'm really glad to hear that you had a good time, and hopefully this will encourage you to branch out into other. Maybe check out that Goosebumps musical. Like, and if you do, tell me about it. That sounds really cool. But yes, I really wanted to get your thoughts on being on the ground for the Arthur musical. So Peebs, I appreciate your little review here of the Arthur musical. If anybody is in that area, I think we would both heartily recommend you go, and Peebs has the first person experience to be able to say that it's a good old time. So Peebs, thanks a lot for your firsthand account here. Really appreciate you doing that. I'll just give you a sec real quick. What's going on these days with your various social media accounts?
Still tweeting on the Twitter, still posting on the Instagram. YouTube is kind of crazy up and down with, all their policies and everything, algorithms changing. So, haven't been too much on YouTube lately, but I'm still there. I'm not leaving that by any means. So, check me out at It's Peebs on most platforms.
And that's Peebs with 3 E's. We
Correct.
may not have the Arthur television show anymore, but we still have one of the better repositories of Arthur information online, and that is Peebs himself. Appreciate your time, man, and thanks a lot for letting us know about the Arthur musical.
Thanks a lot, Will. Thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, it's Lucas from the Elwood City Limits podcast, and if you love ECL, there's a couple of ways to keep up with us. You could go to facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, at ECL Podcast, that's our Twitter. We take questions on Tumblr. It's elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. There is an Instagram as well, Elwood City Limits on Instagram. Of course, if you want to donate to the show and get exclusive content, whether that's our full-length commentary of the Arthur movies, our brand new bi-weekly PBS Kids review show, as well as our video game movie reviews with the Sonic movie review and Pikachu movie review, you can check out patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And that's also going to get you access to the Elwood City Limits Discord, which me and Will like to post in from time to time. And if you want that sweet, sweet Elwood City Limits merch, check out teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store. You can listen to the podcast at libsyn.com/Elwood City Limits, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and there's other podcast apps like Stitcher, and if we're not on your favorite app, let us know. And where can you let us know? Well, that's going to be at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. That's also where you can send us a question, and we'll read it on the show. Finally, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do so is to tell a friend who likes animation or Arthur or just podcasts in general, and to go to our iTunes page and rate us out of 5 stars. Apparently, that helps podcasts out. Bye, everybody!
All right, so for this little special Elwood City Limits presentation here, we've already talked about, one review. We've been reviewing a lot of Arthur media these days. In the past, we've talked about not just the television show, but we've talked about, like all kinds of media that Arthur has been a part of. We've talked about the books. We're going to talk hopefully more about the video games some of these days, but we have talked about that kind of in a casual manner. We've talked about the toys. We've talked about a lot of different ways, as you just heard. We talked about the musical, and now there's another way that Arthur is becoming known to a new generation of listeners, and that's through an official Arthur podcast. Now, obviously, as a proprietor of an Arthur podcast myself, Lucas, we have some feelings about that, and I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about them. But I also saw this as an opportunity to, I don't know if you guys know this, but Elwood City Limits is not the only Arthur podcast out there. As a matter of fact, since Elwood City Limits has begun, there's been a few. Now, not all of them have lasted, but I put a little call out, and I'd like to say that I welcome a diverse and a healthy Arthur podcast scene. So I wanted to talk about the official offerings of the PBS Arthur podcast, the official one, with another Arthur podcast that you may have heard of or you may not have. But I hope by the end of this, you may be adding them to your podcast ecosystem. And that's the guys from the Sugarbowl podcast. Hey, guys.
Hey!
So that's Eli and Chris from the Sugarbowl podcast, who are another episodic Arthur podcast. And guys, I'm really glad I was able to set this up. I figured if we're going to talk about Arthur podcasts, like it could just be me talking, but I feel like the patrons of the listeners of Elwood City Limits, the patrons and the free feed alike, they hear a lot from me. And I really think it's better when we get more voices on here. So I'm really glad to kind of welcome you to a episode such as it is of Elwood City Limits. And so, I mean, first of all, in case anybody doesn't know, I know that we have, we've been here since 2016 and we have quite a few listeners, but I would really like people to be able to get to know the fact that there are other Arthur podcasts out there besides ours. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about the Sugarbowl podcast itself?
Well, definitely I think we are the other Arthur podcast. We are the dark bunny of Arthur podcasts.
Yes. Gritty is a word that has often been described.
Yeah, we are the gritty off color. No, we are definitely not.
You're for the mature fan.
For the
want to sip on a Chardonnay
You're-
and listen to their Arthur content.
your favorite Arthur podcaster's favorite Arthur podcast. No. Well, man, I'm so we are absolutely honored to be on the ECL line. Like during the intro, me and Chris were just sitting here on mute, and I think I had a heart attack. At least one. I'm so stoked. I'm stoked, man, to be here.
I mean, this has been just a fun project that Eli and I started back in 2019.
Yeah, you're the dates guy.
That
You're the
would-
dates and facts guy. If you listen to the show, that's something you'll learn. If
Yeah.
you decide to grace your listening ears to our feed as well.
We used to perform improv together here in Des Moines, and then some things, we went our separate ways, but we just thought we enjoyed working with each other so much. What is an avenue that we can do that? And that was a podcast. And we got together in a coffee shop in early 2019, and we're thinking, well, what should we do a podcast about?
Yeah.
And we were landing in this nostalgia area. What were some things we remember from childhood that were super formative and still had a lasting impact today? And we both were very shaped by Arthur growing up.
I want to say there was a conversation where we were hanging out with some mutual friends, and I need to ask my friends to back this up, because to me this is very true, but I've never asked. I think it's like a meme in my circle of friends that I push conversations towards Arthur because it's such a frame of reference for me. Everybody's like, oh, SpongeBob this and Harry Potter that, and I didn't watch those as a kid. I was on that PBS grind, and watching and rewatching and rewatching and rewatching Arthur. And then I run into Chris, and instead of going haha, yeah, that is a meme, he's like, oh yeah, me too. I do the exact same thing. And now here we are. 2 years?
Yeah.
Every other week. Had a little hiatus this year. With me going through some heavy life stuff, but we're here, dude. I'm on the ECL
Back
line.
on the saddle.
Dude, I think we had a redemption arc, is really what it was.
Well, and I'm always really glad to find out that this is something that, and I guess I'm just speaking about podcasting in general. It's such it has the opportunity to be so diverse, and it was a little. I'll admit to you, it was a little strange when I found out. Wait a minute, there's another Arthur podcast about here, and I was like, how am I supposed to feel about this? And then
you think you're striking the nichest niche ever?
There's
Dude,
you
okay.
go into this thin mine, and you're down here, no one else is mining this gold, and you turn
Yes.
around in this cramped tunnel, and there's all of a sudden some other miners down there, and you're like, this vein's only big enough for one pipeline.
Surely. But then, we did it, and I feel we definitely complement each other. A lot of our listeners have said that they listen to both, and it's just it's cool to hear the same, because we both do the episode recap format. But to hear, I guess our perspectives are wildly different. I will admit, I'll be the first. I've not listened to much ECL. I've dipped in to see what it's like, but I admit I have not listened to a ton of it. But people tell me, that our perspectives are crazy different.
I think so. And you already kind of illustrated it there, and I wanted to maybe tease this out a little bit. So you mentioned your background in improv, and that is something that admittedly, like Lucas and I we have a good rapport with each other, but neither of us are skilled improvisational comics to any degree. And from what I've listened to of the Sugarbowl podcast, that's immediately what is the takeaway here. And I think it's I'm gonna use like a regional kind of thing here, where it's like over here in Atlantic Canada we have like, a lot of donaires. A lot of places make donaires, which are like these little pockets. It's kind of like almost goes hand in hand with pizza. It's like shaved beef in like a pocket bread sort of thing.
Ooh. Could you send one our way?
I don't know if it'll hold up in the mail from here to you guys in the States, but if I can find a way to point you towards one, they maybe check your frozen aisle. You never know. Like you might come across a freezer that has like
not an authentic, but as close as we're gonna get without getting the real thing.
Of course, without coming all the way down here. But what I mean is that when you have something like that, which, as you said, it's like we are a niche of a niche in the Arthur podcast, and Don't Air, is kind of a niche thing for Atlantic Canada, but you have different places that make donairs around here, and they all make them a little different. And it's like, I like this place because it's spicier. I like this one because it has more like sauce on it. And listening to you guys, it's like when I realized that having more Arthur podcasts is a good thing, because you guys have a completely different dynamic than us, and I can totally see people listening to you guys and being like, yeah, I prefer that, just because you guys are really funny. Like your setup, like just even on a technical level, your setup is way different, and it allows for that improvisational style that really comes across. So I think that there is no one right way to do it. So as soon as I kind of realized that myself, I was like, this is great. And I was really hoping that one day I'd be able to talk to you guys and let you know that, like, I'm really glad that you're still here.
Dude, we're glad you're here. That was so much validation. My ears are ringing. Because, and like I say that because, like, I don't know, a lot of our friends have said like, hey, great, we love the pod or whatever. And honestly, wait, I need to shout out some homies. The homie Mallory, oh my gosh, she's my old boss and has like consistently like hit me up like, yo, this bit was funny or whatever. But outside of that, and we have our like hardcore listeners, but to have another the ECL say that our podcast was funny, I don't know. I just like respect that so heavy.
It's
can we blow him up a little bit? What? He just complimented us so much.
Oh my gosh,
because I really love how like well organized ECL is. There's like the Patreon, and like even just hearing you do the intro, I'm like, dude, I would trust this guy to manage my money. You know what I mean? Like,
Please
this guy sounds.
No, too late. I already wired you a significant amount of money.
Yeah,
you'll never see that again. I promise you.
I don't know how the exchange rate is, but
you know, Chris,
it's very slanted in my favor.
Chris, I'm really glad that Will took all of your money, because you're so much more down to earth now. Wow, he really pulled it off.
Yeah,
it's a learning experience.
And when I make my next $400, it's gonna be a different tale, I tell you.
Yeah.
Only 400. You're a little bit light. You're a little bit light on this one, so we're gonna have to keep boosting that up. All right.
Oh, great.
Get back to work.
See, this is how I make money. It's not off of the Patreon. It's off of extortion.
The reason there aren't any other Arthur podcasts is he's invited them on and he's taken their money.
They didn't
he's
pay.
Taking everything
they didn't pay.
He's the mafioso in the neighborhood, and we're like, please, we've got the meats. We're a little short this week. I'm sorry, boss.
No. You pay the Arthur tax to me.
This guy's a tough customer.
Molto bene over here. So yeah, this is a great opportunity to introduce you to. I mean, I'm not the type of person who likes to look at like how many like audience numbers and stuff. But for anybody who hasn't heard of you, I think that this is a great opportunity to do that and to kind of like podcasters helping podcasters, because along with, we've always had an idea that we want this to be fun. So the only way it's more fun is that if there's more people to kind of play in the same area as you. So that was part of this. So if I can just kind of ask you a couple things here. You did get into it a little bit, but so your history with Arthur, you were PBS Kids growing up. Even as you mentioned, like kind of forsaking other typical cartoons that we would have grown up with.
Let's just say Eli forsook. That's the right
heavily forsoaked, honestly, in a lack of my parents were like the and they've changed a lot since then, so please don't think of them only like this, but they were exactly that stereotype of satanic panic, Pokemon means pocket demon, Harry Potter is witchcraft, and they have evolved past that so far. It's insane to think that they were like that for so long, but that was my childhood, so it was like, okay, well, what's safe? It's like, well, sports, wasn't really into that. And PBS Kids, and I watched Arthur through my like early teens, like 14. I'm still sitting down and throwing up, 2 or 3 eps during breakfast or whatever.
And was it to the point? So like for me, and I've said this before on the show, like when I was growing up, I had them like episodes memorized. Now, were you quite at that level, or
Yes.
Okay, so it wasn't just me then.
Yeah, you'd have that. I'm trying to think of like an isom. Oh, like the. Liquefy or whatever. Those lines.
Twirl, blend, whip, liquefy.
Liquefy. Oh, you got it. He got it. Just in case Will has not sown the street cred that you clearly to us you have.
My bona fides.
There's your proof, bro. That's season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Episode like a 6.
There's no way Will has watched this in the last 2 years. Or maybe he does watch them a lot on the reg.
There's a non-zero chance, but it's been a while.
I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, I know the last one. I can't pick all of them, but you had them in the holster.
And
I just wired you the rest of my money.
Cheers. So you kind of, I think we probably had similar ideas of like you wanted to get into podcasting, and you decided that this was kind of a bit of a niche because like what were there other ideas that you had before you settled on an Arthur podcast, or like a general idea of what you wanted to accomplish with a podcast?
Yeah, I mean,
I shook my head and Chris nodded. So.
Because I was the one that proposed the other idea, and then we didn't choose that idea, so we went with Arthur. The one idea that I came up with was like 99 counties, because the state of Iowa has 99 counties, and I wanted to do an episode about each county and like the weird things that happen in these small towns that nobody's ever heard of.
Yes, I do remember this.
And
not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea at all.
Ours.
It's a TM copyright.
Copyright. See.
But once we started talking about what Arthur would look like, I think it came out that Eli and I both have this idea that we want to make it fun, but we also want to make it wholesome to match the energy of the show that we were reviewing.
Yeah.
Like there's no part of us that wanted this to be like PG-13, super edgy. Now that we've grown up, and
that was a decision that we made early on too. Of like, I think in like if you listen to the first episode, I definitely drop an F-bomb at one point. And I remember after we finished recording, I was like, that didn't feel good. Let's not do that anymore. So we bend that a little bit here and there, but it's just like, no, we mainly want to, because especially when the Arthur memes were taking off, of like, kids could be listening to this.
Right.
Yes.
I'd want kids to listen. Like, I want this to be a family thing. Like The Adventures in Odyssey was something that was like a big pipeline of, hey, the whole family can enjoy these stories. And wouldn't it be cool if there was a podcast that like had jokes that the parents were laughing at, but that the kids could also enjoy at the same time, if that was the scenario. Like, it's just you're reaching a bigger audience that way and not worried about the E tag on any of the podcatchers.
And clearly, Arthur does that. They're not afraid to literally have a whole section of an episode in South Park vision or whatever, and like clearly reference one of the most vulgar shows ever made, arguably, or at least as far as like popular shows. So it's like, oh, let's just take that energy, because that's what we liked about the show anyway. So it's a nice, and I'm sure you've seen this too, it's a nice like you doing the podcast feeds like the cultural idea of stuff not needing to be edgy to be funny, which is your podcast is not edgy to be funny, which Arthur's not edgy to be funny. That energy has just been really sick, and you see it in the listeners too, that like they're vibing with that. Like that whole space is so cool. Well, it's also very awesome just to hear that you're so into that too.
Well, right, and I wanted to ask you kind of, so, you know, coming up on 2 or 3 years of doing this, how do you feel your experience has been from a standpoint of like learning about the Arthur fan community, like feedback from listeners, feedback from other people, like how have you found the experience of being an Arthur podcast so far?
It's been...
It's a Chewy question.
Yeah.
And I say it as a compliment. I don't know if Chewy
for
comes
sure.
off as
Yeah.
always.
I think we're still at the point where like we every episode still say like, email us, tell us how we're doing, please talk to us. And we've had some responses, and it's been super fun to see the handful of folks that have felt the need to like reach out and talk to us about things that they've enjoyed about the podcast or Arthur adjacent stories that have happened in their life. And I think the one that really kind of got me, at least, is when we just kind of came out of this 4-month hiatus. We had a couple folks email us and say, I really hope the podcast isn't done.
Yeah.
Like, please, like, let me know, because I just started listening and I've been going through the back catalog and I've really enjoyed it. And I see you guys aren't updating anymore, and that makes me really, really sad, but I hope that everything's okay. And we had 2 emails that were like that. And I don't know, that just knows, and it's people we don't know. I think that was when we knew that we had something special. Is all of a sudden we're getting a couple of emails from like Atlanta, Georgia, and then we had someone from Ottawa email us. And I was like, we're actually like getting out there, and people that have completely different walks of life than us are listening.
I completely relate, especially because that was something that really kind of messed with me for the first year or so of doing this, and especially because, you know, it was something that we wanted to do for fun, but I remember for like, you know, especially like 6 months in when Lucas and I were doing this weekly, and it's just like nothing seemed to be happening, and it's like maybe people are listening. It felt like potting into the void, you know, and it was just like, is this worth it in the end? Like, I'm paying like $150 a year on SoundCloud. Like, what's the point? And then you get like one person, like one tweet, one Facebook comment, one email, and it's like, okay, this is actually going somewhere. And then really, in my experience, it starts a chain reaction. It starts the rock slide of like, then you get another email, then you get another, and then you get like more people following you. And I bet you guys have had some really great ones as well, because the Arthur community, such as it is, I think it's a very general and nebulous term, but, you know, very generally quite kind and understanding and charitable people. Like, I was just looking through my files. One of the favorite emails I've ever gotten is from a listener of the podcast who grew up in Syria when it was going through a particularly war-torn time, and Arthur was one of their favorite memories. And it's like, listening to the podcast brought back good memories of a childhood that was fraught with conflict. And it was like, it really made me stop and just be like, wow, we're actually kind of might be doing something here in our own small little way. So I'm happy that you guys have gotten that feedback, because I know how important it is, and I only hope that you're able to kind of get more, and it can spur you on to whatever goals you hope to achieve with this.
That bigger and better, baby.
So So the big reason why I wanted to talk to you guys today is, of course, the official Arthur podcast. Now, we've spoken about this on ECL a few times, and again, we make no bones about the fact that, like, this doesn't upset us. This isn't a bad thing. When it was first announced, we were just like, of course, under my breath, I was like, geez, I hope they don't decide to review Arthur episodes. But it was very because it's just like,
no. Can you imagine?
It would be like if the Donair factory moved down the street, and it's just like, well, this mom and pop shop is all done. You don't need us anymore. But
they've automated.
Yes, exactly. just crank out the reviews. Like, just get a robot to review. Just like, I think TW was annoying.
It's like
I concur.
It's like the TikTok narrator voice. And then DW went to the store and stole a candy bar.
Buster
that face when Buster eats chocolate off the grass.
Buster ate all the food. That was really funny.
Ha ha.
The Bradley Cooper Rocket Raccoon voice.
Excellent pull.
So, but thankfully, it was established this is really going to be like narratives for kids. It's supposed to be essentially the show in podcast form. And then over the past few weeks, as it's premiered and gotten out there, that is definitely true. So for this little kind of interview that we have here, you guys, took. I think you managed to take a listen to a bit of it, and I've been subscribed and following along with it. And it's. I don't even want to call this a review because really, what it has been so far is it's audio versions of episodes that have already aired, and they've been like episodes from the first season, episodes from like season like 9 or 10. So they've been kind of all across the Arthur chronology, but they're re-recording it to work in an audio only format. So I guess I'll ask first off, like, what was, from what you listened to, what did you think of it just on its face generally?
Chris is
I'm gesturing.
You're gesturing
I
to
have
me.
some thoughts, but I'll let Eli kick it off first.
Well, I guess I like that you said this isn't a review because it's like that's what I thought too. For a second, I was like pacing around my room, just like thinking about all the hot takes about like, oh, they forgot to do this, or like this tonality is weird. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not who this is for. It is a audio version of the episodes, and as that only, it's great. It does the thing. But for me, I'm thinking of the Arthur legacy, because that's what we're doing, right? Is we're sitting on the pile of amazing Arthur content and just being like, hey, come check this out. It's still pretty good. We went through it all. It's still good.
Yep.
So
seal of approval right here.
Yeah. But now with the audio ones to me feel like, I'm like, I don't know, I just kind of feel like meh. Like, this didn't feel like it elevated the episodes into like a whole new medium in a cool way. It feels like kind of a reboot vibe where it's like, oh, this is still good, right? You guys, it's still warm. Have a bite.
And I felt in a similar fashion listening to Spelling Trouble, and they took the AARDVARK, and in my head I'm like, that was really iconic in the original episode.
Yeah.
And they're taking these beats. There were specific lines that I remembered from the original episode that they implanted. It's like, if you do badly, they'll still let you live in the attic, or something. Like DW has a line that's like that, but there's a slight disconnect where I'm like, I know where this originally came from, and I know what they're trying to do, which is but they didn't, like, toothpaste, Toothpaste. He spells it normally in this one, and I was like, oh man,
TOOTHP.
That was like the funniest bit from that whole original episode.
So
if I ever look up in the mirror with a toothbrush in my mouth and I can see the stuff, I say toothpaste before I spit it out because it's just my head or whatever. So to me, I love that. I love that moment. And on some level, I think it's like, I don't know. I would say it's timeless, but, we're sitting on the Arthur podcast hill saying Arthur is timeless. It's like, duh, of course you would think that.
Well, and see, this you're further proving your claim of your favorite Arthur podcast. It's like, clearly we think about this show in a very similar way. Of as soon as you're like, toothpaste, I'm like, that's exactly, that's it's like that delivery is burned in my brain from all the times so there's kind of more of a positive bend, and then more of a, I don't want to say negative bend, but maybe just observation, and we can kind of go down these two tracks. So the first one that I wanted to kind of throw out to you there is, I will also just generally say, I agree with you. I think it's fine. Like, I think that this is a decent thing to do. It's a cool way to get kids interested in podcasts, and I think that this is, it's pretty much kind of a push. It's like they're not doing anything too weird, but they're also not doing anything super duper interesting with it just yet. So it's interesting. Like, I found it interesting the way that you spoke about it, because it is, very much for, I'll speak for myself, an Arthur old head like myself.
Yes, that's us.
You put a microphone in front of me and it's like, talk about Arthur. I'm just like, boy, wasn't season 1 awesome? And but that's also because I was 6 years old when that premiered, so I was exactly at the right age. So and I've gone back and, like, I still think it's really good overall. Yeah. But it's also like, how much of this is as untouchable as we feel that it is? Because because the three of us, we're thinking of all like the weird deliveries or like especially like the visual gags that really made it sticky in our brains. Whereas for kids who are encountering this for the first time, I really wonder if would it make that much of a difference? Like, is this, as much as it doesn't really serve the need for us, it's also not for us, really.
Yes.
This is very explicitly aimed at young children listening with parents, so which we are. I mean, I shouldn't assume. Perhaps you guys are listening with your parents, but I can't get my mom to sit down with me for an Arthur podcast, so I haven't actually listened to one yet. I'm not allowed.
Got rain checked on that too.
Yeah.
I asked him to leave after a couple after episode 20. I was like, I think we can take the training wheels off. You don't need to push me anymore. Am I doing it?
And then you were like, I don't know how to stop watching Arthur.
And that's why, and that's how we're here at episode 84. So,
also, excellent replication of DW's delivery of "I don't know how to stop."
No, trust me,
I caught that.
Thank you.
I'm sure our listeners did. Honestly,
appreciate you. Yeah. So I think it's just like, do you think that our nostalgia for the episodes that they have already kind of redone is hurtful to our potential encounter with remaking or rebooting Arthur content or not? I know that's a bit of a heady question, so you don't need to certainly solve it here. I'm just kind of throwing it out there because I think
we got the whiteboard out and I've started to write it down.
Hold on. Because my other calculator. I can't use both calculators that I brought.
Because I mean, like, having a podcast about a show that we watched when we were kids, it's like you're going to encounter the weird and like calcified ends of nostalgia where it can be not especially great, even kind of poisonous or toxic at some points. So it's hard, but it is hard to take off those goggles of like, this is my favorite show when I was a kid, and now it sounds weird. It sounds weird and not right to me.
There's new things, and it feels very like crotchety old man energy of like, this was the peak, and I'm not moving on that idea.
Yeah,
I'm thinking back to just minutes ago when we were talking about, like, as we were setting up, I was just kind of like, so general vibes on the pod, and we were kind of like, meh, sort of feels whack just a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I said, in Spelling Trouble, when Ratburn reveals that there's going to be another spelling thing and Arthur actually didn't get saved by the bell or whatever, there's like this like boom, like piano hit to tell the audience that, Arthur's actually in huge trouble. They don't do that in the pod. They just play the triumphant music from when Arthur thinks he's going to be fine.
Yes.
And carries that through. And I'm like, now thinking about that after you asked him this question, I'm like, oh my God, nobody thinks that, Eli. Like, it's just you.
We
like
have a
right,
very specific and narrow view that a large population does not share.
Right. And like in the most recent episode, in the Arthur Snowbiz episode that came out the week that we're recording this, I couldn't stop noticing that like they keep using the same like pieces of the score, and then they keep like repeating them in a way that feels unnatural to the way that Arthur has always presented them. But also, like, if you're a kid, you're not noticing that stuff. Yeah, that's a great point of just like, I care about this, and that's probably weird.
And we're willing to admit that and say, I'm owning this, that again, we're saying, like, not really our audience. Like, it's not for us. It's targeting somebody else. It's introducing them. And maybe if that's a gateway of like, hey, remember we were listening to this, like that Arthur podcast? Well, I've got the old VHSs over at Grandma's place. And maybe this is more used as like a stepping stone for some younger viewers to kind of get introduced to it for the first time in a format that's maybe where the direction of our like youth is going and how they consume media.
Right. And this is kind of the more negative thing. Now, again, I'm kind of using finger quotes here. But the thing that I keep thinking about is that, like, okay, so they're remaking these episodes and they're putting them in podcast form, which I think is, generally speaking, can be more accessible. However, and this is something that I've spoken with Arthur fans for the past couple of years, and it's like, this just tells me that, like, and this is I'm going to be contradicting myself in a moment here, but it just makes me wish that the episodes of Arthur were a bit more accessible than they already are. Now, I will say that according to a listener, they are on Amazon Prime. Apparently, I don't have an Amazon.
Barely. I tell you what, we try to use that for our clips, and the amount of times it's been error, something has occurred, and like it is an extra subscription fee on top of what you're already paying for Amazon Prime to get like.
Because you have to get Amazon Prime plus PBS Kids or PBS Kids Plus or whatever, and then some of the episodes are mistitled. They're straight up missing. There's like just this random episode in season 4 that's just not there.
Ugh.
It's just like 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. I mean, they're even labeled that way. I'm like, completely agree. I'm like standing up almost. I agree with this because it's great media. Why is Amazon the only one who thought to purchase this and put it out to the people?
Well, and also, like, even if, another way to do it is like on the PBSKids.org player. But as Lucas and I have talked about, that player sucks. And it's also not available outside the US. Like, you would need to get a VPN to even look at it. Yeah, no, we can't watch it. Now, I will say that the
that's so whack.
It is available. So the episodes where we are in like season 15, you can get on YouTube for free. And I think that might be Canada exclusive. But again, it's like, hey, I want to watch this episode from season 1 that they just did they just did the podcast episode on.
Yeah,
well, I'm gonna have to go through nefarious means to be able to find it, and it's just like, man, like,
and do the creators of Arthur want that wall? Because I can understand sometimes artists don't want their stuff to be consumable as free content, because then it kind of becomes like just a moment in somebody's feed, and if you work really hard on something, I want it on a wall in a museum or whatever.
Really, and what I'm saying is, put out the seasons on Blu-ray.
Oh, please.
Now I know that is also not exactly accessible either, but just a way to have them and to hold on to them, because I think this is maybe an unfounded fear, but it's like I look at these podcast episodes and I'm like, I don't want kids to stop at these,
Right.
It's just like, you don't, like, hey, you think listening to Arthur's good? Try watching it. Try doing 2 mediums at the same time, your eyes and your ears. Can you imagine?
That's asking a lot for this next generation that's coming up. I tell you what, they are a 1 sense at a time group.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch a Zoomer smell something, like plug in their ears and with the eye blindfolds. You always see them do it, right? When they're shopping for perfumes in the perfume aisle where they are.
Close their eyes.
Yeah.
Cover their mouth.
And you're like, that's a Zoomer.
You try to talk to them and they're too busy getting a victory royale. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a constant problem. So I kind of wanted to. I'm glad we kind of end up on the same way here, but it is very much like this podcast came on the scene, and as you said, we are sitting on the hill of Arthur podcasts, so it's a little bit like I can't exactly hate on it too much, and it's not taking any food off of our table, such as it is, or in this case, it's a crumb off of our table, and not to disrespect our patrons or anything, but it's just like we're not making like. We're not making donaire money off of this. To go back to that old adage that I say all the time.
You guys are making donaire money?
We're making donaire sauce money.
Bro, this guy's like, you guys are improv comedians. I don't know, bro. I think you got to pat yourself on the back. That's a certified banger.
That's
there.
Listen, Will, you have to understand, we make up our sponsors for episodes.
True.
Never had a legitimate sponsor.
We're making donaire bit money. Like how much people are paying us to make a donaire bit right now, which is $0.
So are you sponsored by like Juicier Juice?
Juicy. Oh man, that would be great.
Or like the Arthur TikToking Davis Foundation or something? That's a deep cut for all
That's
news.
Yeah, that echoed somewhere in my brain, but I don't know where the cave is. I know I've heard. I think I understand what the context of that joke is. But anyway.
So, guys, I mean, that's pretty much. I wanted to take the temperature of kind of like where the state of Arthur podcasts
State
are.
of the
Arthur podcast.
Yeah. State of the Art. Oh man,
that's a good name.
Yeah. Maybe we should do a yearly one, and we'll be like, all right, has anyone ruined Arthur? Because if somebody does, we need to be here to like.
Let them know.
Punch them in the shoulder and then get reprimanded by our dad,
State of the Arthur podcast. Yeah. So at the end of 2023, I'll put the call out again, and we'll have to chat about this. But really, I wanted to be able to take this opportunity to let everybody know that it's like, obviously, if you're listening to this right now, you might be listening to it first on Patreon, and you know that the Arthur podcast landscape is the official one, and then there's us, and then there's so much more. Like I don't even think the two of us are, meaning our two shows, are the only Arthur podcasts out there anymore, and there's so much more. And like I've been listening to other podcasts that are like doing what we are doing just with other shows, and it's really cool to be able to make these connections, because in the end that's what this podcast started as, and that's what I hope to continue it as, not just having fun but making connections. And so this was an opportunity to say, like, you know, this is how we feel about it as Arthur podcasters. This is a conversation that I don't really get to have with anybody else, because who else is doing another podcast?
I'm like looking over at Chris. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. This is like literally, like, it's the most low stakes thing, but on some level, this is like the meeting where Elrond is like, we got to go to Mordor to fix this problem.
And all of y'all get it. Like,
Yeah.
you all hear and you have a semblance of what's going on.
Everybody knows what the ring is. Nobody's like, magic is real. You know, it's like we've been there, we've done that, we've watched the mountains of Arthur.
The Arthur podcast cannot be destroyed, Gimli, son of Gloin, by any microphone known to man. Yes.
They can't take us down.
No.
Yeah.
That is
On your point, of saying, like, the scene is thriving. I think we like to poke our heads in whenever we see a new one sort of spring up and go like, let's take a little peek, see what's going on, because and I think I'm saying, in our minds, it was like we got to follow in your footsteps when we came up with this idea, and we're like, feels pretty original, and we're like, somebody's been doing it for 2-3 years already.
Yeah. I mean, we literally, and tell me if I'm making this up, Chris, because sometimes I wonder if this is a lie I'm telling myself because it's funny, that the first idea I had was Elwood City Limits, and so we're like, because we sat down to record episode like 1, which
it's still out there.
I
we didn't
hate
we didn't
so much.
Nah, man, it tells us how far we've come.
It's true. Literally playing the episode in the background, Will. Oh my god. I don't know if you listen to it, man. It's pretty trash. It's like just incomprehensible fever. It's like, it's a fever dream. It's a fugue state.
But like we're like brainstorming ideas for names, and then finding out about you guys and being like, is there any other room? And I think definitively we said yes, and then some, because we've gotten to see these other podcasts like come and go, like new ideas and new perspectives from folks who
Finding DW. What a unique take.
Yeah.
On the Arthur space. It's like just the premise for that show. If for anybody who doesn't know, Finding DW, it's a guy who played DW, a voice actor, played DW, is not doing that now, but wants to interview all the people who did. Like, that's brilliant. And and like you said earlier with the official pod, not taking any food off our plate. We are not doing that in the slightest. So we can all still, it's like somebody found a new shelf to put more Arthur stuff on. And we're all just like, yay! More Arthur stuff!
So the final question that I had was related to like favorite Arthur character and favorite Arthur episode. But
heavy.
I think that is something that if our listeners want to find that out, they should listen to your show. So do you mind putting in your plugs here? Where can people find the show, and where can people find you guys online?
Bet. So I think our website's probably the best place to start. I mean, you can search Sugarbowl Pod. That should bring us up everywhere, like Twitter, Facebook, every podcatcher. The word pod, important. So
you're not getting into football territory,
Yeah.
because we've figured that out real quick of like, yes, the Sugar Bowl. And we're like, that's a big sporting thing. And we sort of forgot about that.
Dude, I was hanging out with some friends. We were talking about football. And somebody brought up that they were really a big fan of the Sugar Bowl, or like, oh yeah, well, they're going to the Sugar Bowl. And I just stood up and was like, oh, that's that stupid thing that's been ruining my results or whatever. And
All of our algorithms.
Yeah. And then quickly realized I'm the only one who understands what I'm saying.
Oh, you guys are going to the Sugar Bowl? Say hi to Mr. Menino for me.
Oh, Mr. Menino.
He's runs the Sugar Bowl.
Maybe
I don't know anything about it.
Oh, maybe you guys haven't gotten there yet. Spoilers.
Ooh, well, I mean, we're in season 5.
Oh, yeah. That's something else that's a bit more unique. or not more, but maybe something that differs between our shows is that we have not seen every episode yet. I've not cracked into the newer ones. I've probably seen through 10?
That feels
9?
comfortable for me as well.
9 or 10. So I legit have not seen the ones where they have cell phones and that
modernized
kind of
and
stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Lucas and I are well into the part where we both stopped watching earlier. So a lot of what we are watching is new to us, but not new to our audience. So
okay.
so they often have the jump on us. I'm like, I can't wait until you guys watch this one. So, I'm only have the jump on you by a little bit. I've seen the ones ahead of you maybe once, maybe twice. So I'm far from an expert. It's really the old stuff that I really kind of have the big time memory for.
Oh yeah. Just to wrap up the plugs thing, Sugarbowl Pod is the best place. We also have an email address, sugarbowlpod@gmail.com. You can send us just anything Arthur related. We had somebody reach out and send us Shamim, that's his name.
yes.
He just told us about this book that his grandmother handmade for him about an episode of Arthur that was really important to him.
Wow.
So if you search SHAMIM in our show on our website or whatever, you can find that episode and that whole story. It's super beautiful. But yeah, we would love to get Arthur stories out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a little segment that we wanted to do as a word from us kids, and then have it be stories that were very similar to if you had a moment that felt like it came out of an Arthur episode. Yeah, send it our way, and we want to share that story out to people, because I think injecting that bit of wholesome good news is is an energy that we definitely want to continue to bring in our show, in this little in between all these goofs and gaffes that we do, and obviously we're having a good time. End of the day, we want people to leave this feeling a little more faith in humanity restored sort of situation.
Yes. Literally that. I mean, you perfect bow for what we are trying to do with the show.
Yeah.
It's obviously nostalgia, fun, but that that maybe is the front seat, but the car is I'm just remembering that the guy who did VeggieTales has a similar story where he looked at MTV and was like, this is so nihilistic and just icky to me, but it's funny. It's super funny and entertaining. So he just pulled the artistry of that and put it into, what if we're just telling kids to be nice to each other or whatever.
And adults can learn from that. I mean, there's straight up been some things as we've been watching that I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be a better coworker or be a better insert here. And I think
the podcast, instantly call your mom energy.
Yep. Grandma, hey, I love you so much. I didn't mean to ignore you. Totally an internal revelation that wasn't driven by a children's show from the 90s. It's all me, organically.
No matter where you get it from, that doesn't mean that it's any less legitimate. And so I just want to end by saying that the Arthur fandom continues to grow in ways that when we started this show, we didn't realize what all was even here when we started. And now that we're 6 years into it, now that you guys are 2-3 years into it, it continues to somehow keep growing and developing in really cool ways. So I want to thank you guys for your time here. It was really, really cool to meet you, and I wish you nothing but success, because you are clearly doing something with the material that we both have. We're making different pictures, but audio pictures. We're making different symphonies. We're making different art out of
symphonies.
Capture that. Concertos.
3-day opera, like The Ring. Or wait, never mind.
But we're doing different things with the materials that we have, and I think there's always going to be room for that. So thank you very much for talking to me about the official Arthur podcast, and perhaps more importantly about you guys and your experience in Arthur. And I think everybody's going to really enjoy hearing from you guys, and it's just nice to open up our world a little bit more.
Thank you so much for opening up this line of dialogue. I think jokingly we play this sort of competitive, totally not real in our minds at all, but sometimes we're like, oh, those ECL boys, we're coming ECL for them now, we're the underdogs, here we go. And all just for the joke, because
it's kayfabe.
It's we know. It's we know that these are they are probably just as kind people just like us who are getting this content. How could you not be? You know,
and it's honestly very satisfying and I think if our listeners find their way or people who like only listen to us or whatever, I think they'll share in our like just glowing happiness that you're just as and so much more kind and wonderful as we could have even hoped. But
it's like
we will keep up the Elwood City. What is it? The Grebes and the. Oh my gosh! What's the other town? The one that Mighty Mountain.
Mighty Mountain.
Yeah,
that works.
Credit restored. Yes,
it's like it's the '90s. You guys are ECW and we're the WWF, and you guys are like, we hate you, and I'm just like, yeah, here's some money. Keep hating us. This is good for business.
Right, this works.
We need the pot to be stirred so that we can all enjoy the fruit at the bottom of the yogurt cup. This analogy fell apart really bad.
No, but the Greek yogurt cups, the one with the fruit at the bottom that you stir in.
Yes. Oh, Greek. Yes. Thank you.
One last thing before we it feels like we're getting to that ultimate wrap up. Anyone else's backs hurt from just getting it padded this entire time? Like,
actually,
like. I think it's going to be a little raw back there.
No, I haven't.
This congratulatory praise to ourselves.
I have a notoriously tough back, so it's very coarse. So
Callous.
So you can pat it all day, and I don't care.
If you had to in the podcast, we're the Hunchback of Notre Dame of Arthur podcast because we've built up layer after layer.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, those layers are pretty impressive on their own self. Should start a callus podcast. Okay.
Pod callus. All right, guys.
Yeah, that's the wrap. We gotta go.
We'll keep doing this for another 20 minutes.
Yeah. You got to stop us.
All right. That's the Sugarbowl podcast. Eli and Chris, thanks a lot, guys. It was really great to get to meet you and talk to you. And maybe we'll talk to you end of 2023 for a state of the art podcast.
That has legs.
State of the art third.
I'm in.
Dude, you're printing money right now.
Hey, wait, that's my money.
I know. It's
have to get out of here.
It smells quite good. It smells like Iowa.
It smells like oh.
Usually we'd edit that if that was staying in. No, I'm not helping you.
It smells like a sliced beef it's a calzone, pretty much.
Were you
tenderloin?
Were you trying to reverse engineer Donair?
Yes. I was gonna say dinar, but that's money.
How about we don't air that bit?
Nice.